The wind whispered secrets through the ancient oaks that guarded the Harmony Creek Cemetery, secrets only Selah's, the grave digger, truly understood. He wasn't just digging holes, he was listening. The earth itself spoke to him, a language of roots and bones, of forgotten sorrows and buried dreams. Selah's knew Harmony Creek like the lines on his own weathered hands. Each tombstone, each plot of land held a story, a piece of the town's intricate puzzle. He'd spent 30 years tending this place, his leather gloves worn smooth from years of contact with the cold, unyielding stone. The graveyard wasn't merely a place of rest, it was a living, breathing entity. The stones themselves seemed to shift and settle with the changing seasons, the moss growing thicker in times of sorrow, thinner when joy touched the town. Selah's felt it most keenly in the dead of winter, when the ground was frozen solid and the wind howled like a banshee. The cold seeped into his bones, a constant reminder of the lives that had come before, their struggles and triumphs now etched into the very fabric of the earth. Selah's lived in a small, ramshackle cottage on the edge of the graveyard, its windows overlooking the silent city of the dead. He kept to himself, his only companions the crows that perched on the tombstones and the occasional stray cat that wandered through the gates. Some folks whispered that he was odd, touched by the spirits he communed with, but Selah's didn't mind. He preferred the company of the dead to the living, their stories simpler, their judgments less harsh. He found solace in the rhythmic clang of his shovel, the smell of damp earth, the quiet solitude of his work. He was the keeper of Harmony Creek's secrets, the silent guardian of its past. He was the last line of defense. He knew that this sheriff that everyone was praising was going to bring ruin. He felt it in his bones. He just needed to figure out how to prove it. The graveyard was restless, the stones buzzing with a low vibration, an anxious hum that only Selah's could sense. Something was coming, something dark, and the graveyard was warning him to prepare. He had to listen. The bad feeling settled deeper in Selah's gut with each passing day. It had started subtly, a slight unease like a misplaced tombstone. Now it was a gnawing dread. Sheriff Barlow had arrived in Harmony Creek like a summer storm, all flash and thunder. He'd smiled wide, shook hands with everyone, and promised to clean up the town, bring in new jobs, and make Harmony Creek shine again. At first, the townspeople were charmed. Barlow was a handsome man, with a booming laugh and a way of making everyone feel important. He organized town picnics, fixed potholes, and even helped Mrs. Gable carry her groceries home. But Selah's saw something else in his eyes, a cold calculation, a hunger that went beyond simple ambition. It was the hunger of a wolf in sheep's clothing. The first whispers started a few weeks later. Old Man Hemlock, who owned the general store, grumbled about Barlow's fees for licenses and permits, fees that seemed suspiciously high. Then Mrs. Peterson, whose family had farmed the same land for generations, received a notice of unpaid taxes, taxes she swore she'd already paid. People started to look at Barlow with suspicion, the initial charm wearing thin, replaced by a growing unease. Selah's watched it all from the edge of town, from the silent vantage point of the graveyard. He saw Barlow's patrol car driving late at night, stopping at the edge of town near the poorer farms. He saw Barlow talking in hushed tones with a slick-looking stranger in a fancy suit, a man who didn't look like he belonged in Harmony Creek. The graveyard seemed to grow darker whenever Barlow was near, the shadows lengthening, the wind carrying a mournful sigh. The stones felt colder to the touch, a warning etched into the very earth. Selah's knew something was terribly wrong. He knew that Barlow was not here to help Harmony Creek, he was here to take it. And Selah's, the keeper of the town's secrets, was the only one who could stop him. He started sharpening his shovel, not just for digging graves, but for digging up the truth. The proof Selah's needed came on a night as black as pitch. A family had lost their child to a sudden illness, and Selah's was tasked with preparing the small grave. The moon hid behind thick clouds, and a cold rain began to fall, making the earth heavy and unforgiving. As he worked, he heard voices, hushed and conspiratorial, coming from behind the old mausoleum. He paused, his shovel resting in the damp earth. It was Barlow and the slick stranger Selah's had seen him with before. He moved closer, careful to stay hidden behind the shadows of the stone angels. Uninhabitable, I tell you, the tests are conclusive. The water's poisoned, the soil's contaminated. It's a public health hazard, Barlow was saying, his voice low and menacing. And the evictions, the stranger asked, his voice smooth and oily, already in motion. Notices will be served next week. Everyone will be gone within the month. Then the land is yours for the taking, Barlow replied, a hint of greed creeping into his tone. Just like we planned. Silas's blood ran cold. He understood now. Barlow wasn't just collecting fees and raising taxes. He was deliberately driving people out of their homes, using lies and fear to steal their land. The contaminated water was a fabrication, a cruel lie designed to scare people into leaving. He could hear the graveyard itself groaning, the earth vibrating beneath his feet in protest. The cold rain felt like tears, wept by the spirits of those buried there, their final resting place now threatened by Barlow's greed. Silas knew he had to act and fast. He couldn't let Barlow destroy Harmony Creek. He had the truth, whispered in the shadows, carried on the wind, etched into the very stones of the graveyard. Now he just had to figure out how to make the town listen. He finished digging the grave, his hands trembling with anger and determination. As he walked back to his cottage, the graveyard seemed to light his way, the stones glowing with a faint, ethereal light, guiding him toward his destiny. Back in his cottage, Silas wrestled with what he had heard. The implications were staggering. The town he had sworn to protect, the people he had watched grow up, all about to be thrown out of their homes based on a lie. He looked out at the graveyard, the stones now shrouded in an even deeper darkness. The wind howled, rattling the windows of his cottage, as if the graveyard itself was urging him to act. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from outside. Silas grabbed his lantern and cautiously opened the door. A large branch had fallen from the ancient oak that stood sentinel at the entrance to the graveyard, crashing onto the path, blocking the way. But it wasn't just any branch. It was the oldest, thickest branch, the one that had been there for centuries, its roots entwined with the very bones of the graveyard. It seemed impossible that it could have fallen on its own. Silas ran his hand along the rough bark. The wood felt strangely cold, almost vibrating with a low hum. He knew then that the graveyard was reacting, expressing its own anger and distress. It was a tangible sign, a clear message that he was not alone in this fight. The graveyard, in its own way, was ready to defend itself and the town it guarded. He noticed something else. The fallen branch had exposed a patch of earth that had been hidden beneath its roots. In the soft soil, something glinted in the lamplight. Silas knelt down and carefully brushed away the dirt, revealing a small, tarnished silver locket. He opened it, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside were two tiny portraits, a young woman and a man in uniform. He recognized the woman instantly. It was Alara Hemlock, Old Man Hemlock's grandmother, who had died mysteriously over 100 years ago. The man in uniform he didn't recognize. But he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this locket was a clue, a piece of the puzzle that would help him expose Barlow's lies. The graveyard was speaking to him, guiding him, offering him the tools he needed to fight back. He closed the locket, his grip firm. He was ready. The graveyard was with him. The next morning, Silas went to see Old Man Hemlock. The old man was behind the counter of his general store, his face etched with worry. He had received an eviction notice, claiming his store was built on contaminated land and posed a health risk. "It's nonsense, Silas," Hemlock said, his voice trembling. "This store's been in my family for generations. We've never had any problems. It's that Barlow trying to squeeze us out." Silas showed him the locket. "Do you recognize her?" Hemlock peered at the tiny portrait, his eyes widened. "That's Alara, my grandmother." "How did you find this?" Silas explained how he had found it in the graveyard. Hemlock was stunned. "Alara died mysteriously, Silas. They said it was a fever, but my grandfather always suspected foul play. He said she was about to expose something terrible, something that threatened the town." "What was she going to expose?" Silas asked. Hemlock shook his head. He never told me he took the secret to his grave. But I remember him saying it had something to do with the old Harmony Creek Mining Company. The mining company, Silas knew the history. The company had been the town's lifeblood a century ago, but it had closed down after a series of accidents and rumors of shady dealings. The land it occupied was now considered worthless, riddled with abandoned mines and supposedly contaminated soil. But what if Barlow's contaminated land claim was connected to the mining company, not some new environmental disaster? Silas thanked Hemlock and left the store, his mind racing. He went straight to the town archives, a dusty, forgotten room above the library. He spent hours poring over old records, deeds, and newspaper clippings, searching for any connection between Alara Hemlock, the mining company, and the land Barlow was trying to seize. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old paper, but Silas pressed on, driven by the graveyard's silent urging and the memory of Alara's hidden secret. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, he found it. A faded newspaper article detailing a lawsuit Alara Hemlock had filed against the Harmony Creek Mining Company, accusing them of illegally dumping toxic waste into the town's water supply. The article mentioned a secret map hidden somewhere on the old mining company property that proved the dumping. The map, that had to be what Barlow and the wealthy businessman were after. It wasn't just about the land. It was about hiding the truth about the contamination, a truth that could expose their scheme and ruin their plans. Silas had his proof. Now he needed to find that map. Finding the map wouldn't be easy. The old mining company property was vast and overgrown, a maze of crumbling buildings, abandoned shafts, and tangled vegetation. But Silas had an advantage. He knew the land better than anyone. The graveyard had whispered its secrets to him over the years, stories of miners lost in the shafts, of hidden tunnels, of forgotten landmarks. He knew where to look. He started his search at dawn, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the trees. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying wood. He walked slowly, carefully, his eyes scanning the ground for any sign of the past. He consulted the headstones of miners, each one a silent guide. One stone, belonging to a foreman named Jebediah, mentioned a hollow tree near the north shaft. Silas remembered the story. Jebediah had supposedly hidden a stash of gold near the tree. Could the map be hidden there as well? He found the north shaft easily enough, a gaping hole in the earth, now choked with weeds and debris. Nearby, he spotted a massive oak tree, its trunk gnarled and twisted with age. He circled the tree, searching for any sign of a hollow. Finally, he found it, a small opening hidden behind a curtain of ivy. He reached inside, his fingers brushing against something smooth and hard. He pulled it out. It was a small wooden box sealed with wax. His heart pounding, Silas broke the seal and opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a rolled-up piece of parchment. He unrolled it carefully, revealing a hand-drawn map of the mining company property. The map showed the location of the mine shafts, the processing plant, and a network of underground tunnels. But it also showed something else, a large, red X marking a spot near the old water reservoir. Underneath the X in faded ink was written, "Toxic Waste Dump Site." This was it, the proof he needed. The map confirmed that the mining company had deliberately dumped toxic waste into the town's water supply, poisoning the land and endangering the lives of the townspeople. Silas carefully rolled up the map and placed it back in the box. He had the evidence, but he needed to find a way to present it to the town, to expose Barlow's lies and save Harmony Creek from destruction. He knew that Barlow wouldn't give up easily. He would fight back, using his power and influence to silence him. But Silas was ready. He had the truth, the graveyard at his back, and the spirit of Alara Hemlock guiding his way. He wouldn't let Barlow win. He wouldn't let Harmony Creek die. Silas knew he couldn't go directly to the authorities. Barlow controlled the sheriff's department, and anyone who questioned him risked facing his wrath. He needed to find a way to get the truth out to the townspeople, to awaken them to the danger before it was too late. As he walked back to town, he saw Martha, sitting on the porch of her small cottage, her face pale and drawn. Martha was an elderly woman who lived alone, her husband having passed away years ago. She was known for her kindness and her beautiful garden, which she tended with loving care. She had also received an eviction notice, claiming her land was needed for future development. Silas stopped to talk to her. "How are you holding up, Martha?" Martha sighed. "Not well, Silas. I don't know what I'm going to do. This is my home. My husband and I built it with our own two hands. I have nowhere else to go." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand why Barlow is doing this. He seemed like such a good man at first." Silas sat down beside her on the porch. He couldn't tell her everything, not yet, but he could offer her hope. "Don't give up, Martha," he said, his voice firm. "There's something not right about all this. I'm going to find out what's going on, and I'm going to stop him." Martha looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Do you really think you can, Silas? Barlow is a powerful man." "I have some powerful friends too, Martha," Silas said, glancing towards the graveyard, "and I have the truth on my side." He helped her with her gardening, pulling weeds and watering her flowers. As he worked, he told her stories about the people buried in the graveyard, stories of their struggles and their triumphs, stories of their resilience. He wanted to remind her that Harmony Creek had faced hard times before, and it had always found a way to survive. As he left, Martha squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Silas," she said, her voice stronger now. "You've given me hope." Seeing Martha's vulnerability, her fear, and her quiet strength solidified Silas's resolve. He wasn't just fighting for the town, he was fighting for Martha, for Old Man Hemlock, for all the vulnerable people who were about to lose everything. He had to succeed. The graveyard demanded it. Silas knew he couldn't reveal the map directly. It was too risky. Barlow would confiscate it, discredit him, and bury the truth forever. He needed to plant seeds of doubt, to guide the townspeople to the truth without revealing his hand. He started with the blacksmith, a strong, independent man named Jedediah, named after the foreman in the graveyard, strangely enough. Silas knew Jedediah valued honesty and fairness above all else. He left an anonymous note on Jedediah's anvil, a copy of the newspaper article about Alara Hemlock's lawsuit against the mining company. The note simply read, "Look into the past." Then he targeted the schoolteacher, Miss Abigail, a bright, inquisitive woman who taught the town's children about history and civic responsibility. Silas slipped a copy of Barlow's contamination report under her door, with certain passages highlighted that contradicted historical records of the town's water quality. He also included a note, "Are the facts adding up?" He knew it was a gamble. Some people might dismiss the clues as coincidence or rumor. But he hoped that at least a few would start to question Barlow's motives, to dig deeper, to uncover the truth for themselves. He also left an anonymous donation at the church, earmarked for helping families facing eviction. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Days turned into weeks. Silas watched from the shadows, tending the graveyard, waiting to see if his seeds would sprout. He saw Jedediah poring over old books in the library, his brow furrowed in concentration. He saw Miss Abigail leading her students on a field trip to the old mining company property, pointing out discrepancies in Barlow's report. He heard whispers in the town square, people talking about the mining company, about Alara Hemlock, about the contaminated water. Slowly, subtly, resistance was building. People were starting to question Barlow, to challenge his authority. The truth was beginning to seep into the light, like water seeping through cracks in a dam. The graveyard seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the stones vibrating with a renewed sense of hope. Silas knew that the final confrontation was coming. He just needed to be ready. He had planted the seeds. Now it was time to harvest the truth. The town meeting was held in the Harmony Creek Community Hall, a space usually reserved for potlucks and dances, now filled with a palpable tension. Barlow stood at the front of the room, a stack of documents on the table before him. He spoke with his usual confidence, presenting his irrefutable evidence of the town's contamination. Charts displayed alarming levels of toxins in the water and soil. Expert testimonies, seemingly legitimate, painted a grim picture of Harmony Creek's future. "I know this is difficult news," Barlow said, his voice laced with false sympathy. "But we must face the truth. Harmony Creek is no longer safe. For the health and well-being of your families, you must relocate." A murmur of dissent rippled through the crowd. Jedediah stood up, his face grim. "Sheriff, I've been doing some digging. I've found records that contradict your report. The mining company dumped waste here years ago. Why wasn't this addressed then?" Barlow brushed him off. "That's old news, Jedediah. This is a new, more serious contamination." Miss Abigail rose to her feet. "Sheriff, I took my students to the old mining company property. The contamination levels are significantly lower than what your report claims." "Why the discrepancy?" Barlow's face tightened. "Those are just preliminary findings, Miss Abigail. The official tests are conclusive." Silas watched from the back of the room, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew this was his moment. He stepped forward, his presence silencing the room. All eyes turned to him. "Sheriff," Silas said, his voice clear and steady, "you say this contamination is recent, but that's not true. It's been here for over a century, thanks to the mining company." Barlow scoffed. "What do you know about it, Silas? You're just a grave digger." "I know more about this town than you'll ever know," Silas retorted. "I know that the town's founder, Elias Harmony, specifically chose this location because of its naturally pure spring water. There's a historical marker in the graveyard, erected by his son, that describes the spring in detail, boasting about its cleanliness and health benefits. It even mentions that the water was tested regularly and found to be completely free of contaminants." He paused for effect. "That marker was erected after the mining company started operating. So your claim of a recent contamination doesn't hold water. The water was pure, even with the mining company's operations." A gasp went through the crowd. Silas had struck a blow against Barlow's credibility. The townspeople knew the historical marker. They had seen it, read it, and trusted its words. Barlow's lies were starting to unravel. The graveyard, Silas knew, was smiling. Barlow's face flushed with anger. He knew he was losing control of the situation. He needed to discredit Silas, to make him look like a liar, a troublemaker, someone not to be trusted. "And who are you going to believe, folks?" Barlow sneered, pointing at Silas. "A grave digger, a man who spends his days talking to dead people, a man with a past he's trying to hide." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then he pulled out a file he had clearly prepared in advance. "Let's talk about Silas Blackwood's past, shall we? Let's talk about the time he was caught stealing apples from Mr. Henderson's orchard when he was a boy. Let's talk about the bar fight he was involved in 15 years ago, a drunken brawl that landed him in jail for a night. Let's talk about the unpaid debts he owes around town. Is this the man you want to trust with your future?" A hush fell over the room. Silas stood motionless, his face pale. He knew Barlow was digging up old dirt, minor offenses, youthful indiscretions, but they were enough to cast a shadow on his character. The townspeople looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Was Barlow right? Was Silas just a flawed man trying to make himself look important? Martha stepped forward, her voice ringing with conviction. "Those were mistakes, Sheriff," she said, her eyes blazing with anger. "Everyone makes mistakes. Silas has always been a good man, a kind man, a helpful man. He takes care of the graveyard, he helps his neighbors, he cares about this town. Those old stories don't change that." Jedediah nodded in agreement. "I've known Silas for years. He's always been honest with me. He's a man of his word. I trust him." Miss Abigail spoke next. "Silas may not be perfect, but he's the only one who's been brave enough to stand up to you, Sheriff. He's the only one who's been willing to fight for this town." One by one, the townspeople voiced their support for Silas. They remembered his kindness, his generosity, his unwavering loyalty to Harmony Creek. Barlow's attempt to discredit him had backfired. Instead of undermining his credibility, it had strengthened his image as a man of the people, a flawed but ultimately good-hearted individual who was willing to risk everything to protect his home. The graveyard, Silas felt, was humming with approval. He had stumbled, but the town had caught him. He wasn't alone. Barlow, defeated but not broken, glared at the crowd, his eyes filled with venom. He knew he had lost the battle for their minds, but he still held a trump card. "You may not believe me about the contamination," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "but you will believe what you see." He reached for the stack of documents on the table, intending to present even more evidence of the town's supposed environmental crisis. Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind swept through the community hall. The windows rattled, the doors creaked, and the lights flickered. Barlow's documents were snatched from his grasp, swirling through the air like autumn leaves. The townspeople gasped, their eyes wide with surprise. It was as if the very building was protesting Barlow's lies. As the documents scattered across the floor, one particular sheet of paper landed face up near Martha's feet. She bent down and picked it up, her eyes widening in shock. It wasn't a scientific report or an expert testimony. It was a map, a detailed blueprint of Harmony Creek, showing the land divided into neatly labeled parcels. But it wasn't just any map. It was a development plan, outlining a massive resort complex, complete with a golf course, a luxury hotel, and rows of expensive condominiums. The names of the developers were clearly printed at the bottom of the map. Barlow's wealthy business partner and several other prominent investors. Martha held up the map for everyone to see. "Look at this," she cried, her voice filled with indignation. "This is what Barlow wants to do with our land. He wants to build a resort to make himself and his friends rich, while we're left with nothing." The townspeople surged forward, eager to see the map for themselves. A collective gasp of outrage filled the room. They understood now. It wasn't about contamination or public health. It was about greed, about power, about stealing their homes and their livelihoods. Barlow's lies had been exposed, not by Silas, not by Jedediah, not by Miss Abigail, but by the graveyard itself, intervening in the affairs of the living, protecting its own. The wind died down as quickly as it had risen, leaving the room in an eerie silence. All eyes were on Barlow, waiting for his explanation. He had none. He stood speechless, his face ashen, his scheme laid bare for all to see. The town meeting dissolved into chaos. The townspeople, their anger simmering, demanded answers, demanded justice. Barlow, his face a mask of defeat, slipped out the back door, disappearing into the night. Silas knew he couldn't let him go. He had to confront him, to understand why he had betrayed the town he had sworn to protect. He found Barlow in the graveyard, standing near Alara Hemlock's grave, the moonlight casting long, eerie shadows across his face. He looked smaller now, diminished, the arrogance gone, replaced by a haunting sadness. "Why, Barlow?" Silas asked, his voice soft but firm. "Why did you do it?" Barlow sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I needed the money, Silas. I had debts, gambling debts. They threatened my family." Silas shook his head. "That's no excuse for what you did. You put the entire town at risk just for money." "I know," Barlow said, his voice filled with remorse. "I made a terrible mistake. I let greed consume me." "It's not too late to make things right, Barlow," Silas said, stepping closer. "You can confess. You can tell the truth. You can help us clean up the mining company's mess. You can start over." Barlow looked at Silas, his eyes filled with a flicker of hope. "Do you really think I can be forgiven?" "I don't know," Silas said honestly. "But you have to try. You owe it to this town. You owe it to yourself." He pointed to Alara Hemlock's grave. "She tried to expose the truth, and it cost her her life. Don't let her sacrifice be in vain." The graveyard stood silent, the stones watching, waiting. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the weight of the town's past, the hope for its future. Silas held out his hand to Barlow, offering him a chance at redemption. The choice was his. Would he accept responsibility for his actions, or would he continue down the path of darkness? The fate of Harmony Creek, and perhaps Barlow's own soul, hung in the balance. The moonlight bathed the scene in an ethereal glow, illuminating the moral crossroads where Barlow stood, his destiny hanging in the balance. Barlow stared at Silas's outstretched hand, his face a battleground of conflicting emotions. He longed for redemption, for a chance to escape the darkness that had consumed him. But the lure of easy money, the fear of his creditors, the shame of his failure, all held him captive. He looked at Silas, at the graveyard, at the moonlit sky, and saw not judgment, but an invitation. An invitation to be better, to be the man he had once aspired to be. But the weight of his past, the chains of his choices, were too heavy to bear. "I can't," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm too far gone. They'll come after me, Silas. They'll destroy me." Silas sighed, his heart heavy with disappointment. He had hoped, against all odds, that Barlow would choose the path of righteousness. But some wounds, it seemed, were too deep to heal. Barlow turned and fled, disappearing into the shadows of the graveyard, his footsteps echoing through the silent stones. Silas watched him go, his face etched with sadness. He knew he had done everything he could. The choice was Barlow's, and he had chosen darkness. The next morning, Barlow was gone. He had packed his bags and left Harmony Creek, leaving behind a trail of broken promises and shattered dreams. The townspeople were relieved to be rid of him, but they also felt a sense of unease, a lingering fear that he might return. Silas, however, knew that Barlow wouldn't be back. He had made his choice, and he would have to live with the consequences. Whether those consequences would be a life on the run, haunted by his past, or something even worse, Silas couldn't say. But he knew that Barlow's story was far from over. The map Barlow had tried to hide became the town's salvation. Jedediah, using his skills as a blacksmith, forged a set of tools to test the soil and water, confirming the mining company's contamination. Miss Abigail, with the help of her students, organized a town-wide cleanup effort, removing the toxic waste and restoring the land to its former glory. The townspeople rallied together, their spirit unbroken, their determination stronger than ever. Harmony Creek was healing, slowly but surely, thanks to the courage of a grave digger, the wisdom of a graveyard, and the resilience of a community that refused to be defeated. The town rallied around Silas, recognizing his courage and his unwavering dedication to Harmony Creek. Martha, her eviction notice rescinded, blossomed once more, her garden overflowing with vibrant colors. The townspeople helped her rebuild her porch, stronger than before, a symbol of their renewed community spirit. Old Man Hemlock, his store safe, filled his shelves with fresh produce and smiled at every customer. Jedediah the blacksmith became a local hero, his tools used to test and purify the water, ensuring the health of the town. Miss Abigail continued to teach the children about their history, about the importance of honesty and integrity, about the power of community. The graveyard, once a place of sorrow and fear, became a symbol of hope and resilience. The townspeople cleaned the headstones, planted flowers, and shared stories about their ancestors. They honored the graveyard as a silent guardian, a source of wisdom, a reminder of the past and a promise for the future. Silas continued his work, tending the graves, listening to the whispers of the wind, guarding the secrets of the town. But now he was no longer seen as an odd recluse, but as a protector, a guide, a friend. Children would often visit him, asking him questions about the history of Harmony Creek, about the lives of those buried in the graveyard. He would share his knowledge with them, teaching them about the importance of remembering the past and honoring the dead. He never forgot Barlow, the man who had tried to destroy Harmony Creek. He often wondered what had become of him, whether he had found peace, whether he had ever atoned for his sins. But he knew that Barlow's story was a reminder that even the darkest of souls could find redemption, and that even the smallest of communities could overcome the greatest of challenges. One evening, as the sun set over Harmony Creek, casting a golden glow across the graveyard, Silas sat on a bench near Alara Hemlock's grave. He looked out at the town, at the houses, the shops, the people, all bathed in the warm light. He smiled. Harmony Creek was safe. It was thriving. It was home. And he, the grave digger, the keeper of the town's secrets, the protector of its soul, had played his part. The graveyard hummed with contentment, the stones vibrating with a peaceful energy. Silas knew that Harmony Creek would endure, thanks to the courage of its people, the wisdom of its past, and the silent guardianship of the graveyard.